When you play a game, there are a wide variety of actions that you can take. And when that game was designed, the developers often have playtesting to ensure that there are no crazy combos or broken interactions that make a character or ability stronger than it should be. What they're trying to do is control the player's power ceiling. So, what's a power ceiling, and why should it matter to you? Let's talk about it today on Draw 5 Move 5. Hey everyone, and welcome to the table. My name is Gabe, and this is Draw 5 Move 5, a show where we draw connections between the mechanics behind our favorite games. I'm back from the 2019 Yu-Gi-Oh! NAWCQ, and I had an absolute blast. For some context, watch last week's video on Power Floors. Anyway, Pittsburgh was an awesome city, and I had such an amazing time at the event. I didn't do very well, but it was a learning experience. And next week, I'm going to do a post-mortem discussion on my experiences and the benefits of competitive play, which includes getting the most out of events like Nats. So if you haven't yet, subscribe and ding-a-ling that notification bell so you don't miss the update. While I dropped well before day 2 of the event, my friend Tavin Gadsby tied for 64th place, and in the 9th round of the tournament actually got to play on Feature Match. For those who don't know, Feature Match is done on camera live, which can be watched on the official Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTube while the stream's up. Check the link below to watch his full match. Watching this match live from the sidelines, it occurred to me how crazy this card game is and how many different types of decks can thrive when piloted well, despite very different play strategies. Trickstar and Crusadia Danger Thunder Dragon are two very different decks. They play out differently across a game. Thunder pours all its resources in at once, and if the board is fully broken, it can be very hard for them to come back. And Trickstar is all about tempo and control, spreading out its plays over several turns. If you were to distill all the powerful things these decks can do, however, and combine it all into one point, the spike you would see would be about the same. These decks have comparable power ceilings. Since we talked about power floors last week, it follows that this week we should talk about power ceilings, the opposite phenomena. While power floors are all about the minimum amount of meaningful things a player can do at any given time in a game, power ceilings instead describe the maximum amount of things you can do as a player. They're a summation of the total amount of power you could have at once. Your best board in a trading card game, having all your most powerful spells active with the best equipment in an RPG, or the most powerful combo or ability you can use in an online video game. Think of it like you were a dying star. Right before the star goes out, it can explode outward in a huge amount of force all at once before collapsing entirely, called a supernova. Using your nova is actually a term in some games, used to describe using your most powerful move or combination of abilities. The last part of a supernova, the part where it collapses in on itself and fizzles, is notable, because in many instances the same happens when a player uses their most powerful tools and combinations. This is because, unlike with power floors, where the minimum things you can do are given and require few to no resources to do, the summation of your power uses up many, if not all, of your limited resources at once. After this, until the opportunity arises to restock those resources, a player is often reduced to their base moveset, their power floor. In Monopoly, for example, you could go Nova and use all of your money to purchase houses on your properties. It's risky for your opponents, but it's also risky for you. Doing so reduces you to your basic actions of moving and drawing cards until money comes back in and gives you the chance to do more. Until such time, you're vulnerable to landing on space owned by your opponent and needing to remove those houses or mortgage your properties to stay afloat. Game developers, when designing and testing ideas well, will try to determine the power ceiling on a strategy, combo, or idea and compare it to other similar things to make sure nothing will become broken by its introduction. This happens a lot in competitive online games like Fortnite, League of Legends, Overwatch, and even Smash Bros, and patches are rolled out to help rebalance if the player experience isn't the same as testing, and the players are unhappy that one character or strategy is clearly better than the others. This is also why TCG like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic have ban lists. While we can't patch our cards to make them more balanced, unlike online TCGs such as Hearthstone, we can ban or limit cards if they prove to be a problem so they're no longer making the game unhealthy. If one deck has a clearly higher power ceiling, the developers will, in an ideal world anyway, look at player feedback and actual game interactions to try and determine problem cards then make hits accordingly on the next ban list to try and bring the strategies back in line with the other meta decks in the format. There will always be good decks and bad decks, but it's important that no deck is so strong that any other deck which should be of a comparable power ceiling has almost no chance of succeeding. Many games also give you the option to add items to your inventory, upgrade equipment, or replace old cards for better ones that can do more for less. These types of upgrades can all increase your power ceiling as a player of the game, but they also often have a steeper cost because that power, that edge, is worth more. If you want to buy meta cards for your deck in a TCG like Yu-Gi-Oh!, you'll likely need to pay a significant amount for those cards because they're in high demand for their utility and may not have a large quantity available. In RPGs like D&D, if you want a stronger potion that can restore more hit points in an action, you'll have to pay more gold for it or spend more time brewing it. And items that allow you to enable or choose from multiple or better effects, such as the Cloak of Elvenkind granting you advantage on only stealth checks to hide, but the Cloak of the Bat granting advantage on all stealth checks, unlimited fly speed, and the ability to turn into a bat, will of course be worth more because of how much more it improves your power ceiling. It does more for you, so it's gonna be harder to get and it's gonna cost you more. Increasing your power ceiling is actually expected in some games. RPGs with level up systems, or any game where you're really getting stronger, encourages you to eventually add to and increase your power ceiling. Pokemon, for example, as your Pokemon grow stronger, they grow over time and gain more power. Their power ceiling goes up, but so does the power ceiling of your opponents. It's expected that you're going to grow over time. However, your power ceiling isn't everything. Let's look at the example I used earlier, Tavin's feature match against Frank Nicola. Frank was playing Crusadia Danger Thunder, while Tavin was piloting Trickstar. In Game 1, Frank played out his entire combo and ended on a field that could negate one spell, negate one face-up card, return any card to Tavin's hand, and prevented Tavin from searching any cards from his deck, in addition to removing one card from Tavin's hand before his turn even started. Doing so left Frank with 2 cards in hand, and he had used 13 of his 15 extra deck cards, a limited pool of monsters with powerful effects that can be accessed at any time you meet the requirements for their summoning. It should not be understated that this is a very powerful ending board. Some players would have conceded Game 1, opting not to give their opponent knowledge of their deck that could be used for siding against them in Game 2. However, Tavin instead played through the entire board, dropping Super Poly and several other powerful effects to eventually dismantle the entirety of this board. The match from there went back and forth, but since Frank had depleted most of his resources, and Tavin had many powerful trap cards to control his opponent's actions, Frank was struggling significantly. Only a lucky top deck of Thunder Dragon Roar, which had enough attack points to get over Tavin's biggest monster and eventually put him out of the game, ensured Frank's victory. If we look at the 2 decks across their first game in the match, we can see that Tavin's Trickstar deck has a steadily increasing amount of power as he controlled Frank's board and continued to gain hand advantage, while Frank had a huge power spike at the beginning of the game that dropped very quickly in the following turns. At their highest points, both decks have similar power ceilings, or maximum power, but because Tavin's deck gains power over time, rather than using it all at the start, once he broke through Frank's initial board, the odds were fairly in his favor for victory. Where and when power is applied, or in other words, how it's budgeted, is just as important as your maximum power. This power budgeting is tied to resource use and management. While you can pour all of your resources into one single move, setting up your first turn play in a card game or applying the most damage on a hit in an RPG, for example, it might better serve you to space out your abilities. That's part of the strategy in gaming. Managing your resources well is critical, and some of our most famous gaming stories come from coulda, shoulda, woulda moments where we wish we'd done something different in our resource management or playing. If you're a paladin in Dungeons & Dragons, for example, and you're facing down a large and imposing enemy, let's say, I don't know, a dragon, and you manage to hit with a weapon attack, you can convert any number of spell slots into an equivalent amount of radiant damage that is added to the attack. You still need to roll some dice, so the outcome is a bit of a gamble, but it may be worth it to use all your spell slots and try to take the beast down, or at least make a significant dent. Afterwards, however, you'd be out of one of your limited resources. Until you take a long rest, those spell slots, the method by which you cast your magic, when you don't want to hit things, are gone. so you're far less useful and far more vulnerable to going down and being attacked. You could also choose not to spend those slots, instead just hoping you can hit a few times over several turns and do enough damage with your party to take the dragon down, but by then it might be too late. So you're faced with a choice. Use your limited resources and gain the power all at once, or spread those boosts out over time and try and have better hits overall. The fact that you have to use resources balances the mechanic and caps your power ceiling as a player. We know your maximum potential damage in one hit, but if you actually do so, you can't then hit that hard again for the rest of the day. If you play more conservatively, you can hit a little harder every time, but still have the utility you may need later. These short but large power spikes compared to slow and sustained power that eventually runs out, and the player's ability to choose which they want to do, can be seen in game design across the board. While in trading card games this concept is fixed deck by deck, players can choose what deck they play, so the choice between crazy combo or bust and playing the long game still exists. Meanwhile, in board games like Betrayal at the House on the Hill, we see choices on when to use items and omens you've attained and if you want to sack them to influence the outcome of the game. And in online games like League of Legends and Overwatch, the character's stronger abilities are balanced by longer recharge times or limited uses until the ability has run its full course. We can even see this idea of resource and scarcity equating to power in the Mario series. Various power-ups can be found throughout the games, but two of the most well-known are the Mushroom and the Star. In the original Super Mario Bros. For the NES, mushrooms were found at a rate of about 2 per stage. They made Mario larger and basically gave him an extra hit before he died, in addition to granting the ability to break most blocks from below. The Star, meanwhile, was an item you were lucky to find once every few stages, and for good reason. For about 8 seconds, Mario was invincible, unable to take damage from any source other than falling off the screen, and was able to barrel through enemies, killing them instantaneously. The more basic power-up, the Mushroom, could be found more frequently and provide a smaller benefit over a longer period of time. Meanwhile, the far more powerful Star was a highly scarce resource that only lasted a short time, but granted an incredible power spike during that period. A similar relationship between scarcity and power can be seen in booster boxes for trading card games, the main boxes that contain new cards being introduced into the game. Some of the most powerful cards in these sets are printed in rarities that make them difficult to attain. Infinite Impermanence, one of the best hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh!, was printed as a secret rare in its original release in Flames of Destruction. With only 2 secret rares per box out of a pool of 8 total secrets, getting a playset of 3 of this card was difficult without spending between $100 and $200. So clearly, there are correlations in almost every game between the scarcity and cost of actions and their power level. Balancing your resource use as a player can be difficult, but it introduces a level of strategy that games benefit from. With all this power, however, comes the knowledge that as a player, you should be a decent match for your foes because your power ceilings should be about the same. If not, the developers may have made something unbalanced, or you may just not have the proper tools yet to defeat your opponents. In these cases, it's up to the player to practice, level up, find or buy items, get new cards, and do what they can to match the power ceiling that they're expected to have in order to succeed on the level they're trying to play at. Once that ceiling has been raised, so will your chances at success. So grab your favorite game, and let's break through that ceiling together, shall we? Thank you so much for watching. You have my humble and eternal gratitude. What did you think of the conversation? How well do you feel the best options in your favorite games are balanced? Are the power ceilings comparable? And how do you like to manage resources? Balanced use over a long period, or going all power all at once to try and make that all-important push? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let's keep this discussion rolling down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video and you want to hear more from me, hit the like button. I'm putting out new videos every week on games and game mechanics, so be sure to subscribe and ding that notification bell so you never miss an update. My name is Gabe, this is Draw 5 Move 5, and until next week, go have a good game.